everybody, and welcome to the Supercars Exchange podcast. As always, I am joined by Shane. How you going, Shane?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm going pretty good. So, we had Hidden Valley over the weekend, one of my favourite rounds. But the controversy started before the racing had even begun, really, with the Commodores having their aero altered. We thought we had finished with the aero altercations, but it just came back up again in a big way.
Yeah, that's it, mate. Like they may have realised that, hang on, we can't change the Mustang anymore. They will have a lynch mob ready for us, so they thought they'll change the Holden this time. So it looked like it was pretty small changes. Like from what I was able to read, I think it was only mainly to give them a little bit more front end grip, rather than any outright pace. So I think it was more just tyre life through the races was probably going to be a bit kinder to them and a little bit more cornering speed perhaps, but they took a little bit of rear wing off, and I don't know if it would have been the same if it was before the changes or after changes, but strangely enough through the race they had all of the fastest speed trap times where they were all holding, so I don't know if the changes had anything to do with it or they were just, we've always known they've been pretty slippery in a straight line anyways, so I don't think it would have made too much difference. And the Mustangs, they're not like they're 20 k's an hour slower. They're still right on the heels. Just that I think it's the difference between the cars. I think the Holden's a bit slipperier, and the Mustang's got a bit more downforce, so that it's going to work better and worse at different circuits.
Yeah. Also, I think it was also just because initially Supercars tried to have no media coverage of it. The first time I saw it was on some other group, Facebook group that I'm in, and it wasn't even a Supercars media release or whatever. It was literally just a Speed Cafe or something had released it, and everyone was just blowing up because it mentioned the Commodore and then aero changes. And in actual fact, it was only millimeters in the end that they were changing, or centimeters. It really wasn't very much.
Yeah, that's it. It wasn't that much different really to what they changed the Mustang around by earlier on in the year. We jumped pretty hardcore, jumped up and down pretty hardcore about that, and the changes weren't that significant in the end. Obviously it hasn't stopped McLaughlin from storming ahead. He hasn't. He's only lost one race since then, so and that was to his teammate. So I don't think there's going to be much difference. I think it just if it evens it up a little bit, and that's what you got to be happy about, at least as the neutral anyway.
So for the first qualifying session, McLaughlin's taken it out, but it was actually pretty close with Reynolds behind. It was only 0.14 of a second behind, so that's pretty close for a circuit that takes about just over a minute to get around. So he did a 106.10, but McLaughlin said at the end of that session that he could go faster, and obviously he did later in the weekend when he did a 105.4, but there was a lot of people there was 3 people in the 105s for that second qualifying session on the Sunday. So they got significantly faster over the weekend. But then at the beginning of the race for Saturday, the short 42 lap race, 120 Ks, it was just madness. There was just cars all over the place. You thought, just as you were starting to think the first lap had settled down a little bit, Winterbottom ended up on 2 wheels over the top of one of the Nissans, and it was just all over the place.
Yeah, there was certainly no shortage of incidents on the first lap. There was a couple of half spins, and then we've seen Winterbottom. I think it ended up being a handful of laps in, but he's decided to play leapfrog with one of the Nissans, and I'm actually surprised the car continued, but it made it to the end of the race. They lost a lot of pace, I think, out of the car as a consequence, but they still got to the end. But I don't know how he didn't severely damage his steering or break something more significant on the car. So I suppose he got a little bit lucky there. But it was a really interesting start to the race. We sort of got a little bit of Winton, but with the 2 DJR cars coming together. But it's been a while since we've had a lot of first lap, sort of hip and shoulder. Not afraid to push a guy wide just to get that spot, and we often see it at Darwin. So I think it's the narrowness of the circuit that leads to that, but it's always good to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's also like a lot of the drivers going to that first race of the weekend. Really, obviously, it's an unknown what their race pace is like, so really they just push as hard as they can and see where they can end up. And also, it's not a very long race either. It was only 42 laps, so like 45 minutes or so of racing. And just the single pit stop as well. So everyone's really thinking, oh, if I push hard at the beginning here, I can probably get a good position, and that's what we really saw. There was also that incident with Kelly and Slade that was a fair way into the race. Actually, I think it was
I think it was only a couple of laps in, 2 or 3 laps in, but that one was weird because they penalised Rick Kelly for it during the race. They gave him a 15-second penalty. Mm. But then once they looked back at the data overnight, they came back the next day and said, well, actually, no, Slady had a little lift on the exit of the corner, and as he's gone to move back across, that's when Kelly's tagged him. So I would have thought that, hang on, would you not look at that like prior to handing out a penalty? Aren't they supposed to look at all of the telemetry from both cars? But they've just gone, all right, they just shot first and asked questions later.
Yeah, it should have been left to a post-race investigation, especially if it was... I think if it was like a 15-second penalty, especially, but they've probably it's probably just they were probably wrapped up in such of madness that first race was. It was it can get pretty wild up there probably, but it was. From the Kelly on board that I was looking at when I was when they're showing the replays. It's really, really difficult to see from the driver's perspective when you even have an overlap. So Kelly probably didn't even think that he had an overlap, and then he's just tagged him and hasn't even noticed that kind of thing until he's like going across the front of him, kind of deal.
Yeah, that's right. And you only have to have the tiniest of lifts off the throttle in the car, and it's going to slow the car down, especially when the guy behind's at full throttle. He's only just grazed his bumper, but it's enough still to turn him around and put him in the wall. And when they spoke to Rick Kelly after the race, he looked like he'd shot his dog. He was gutted. He felt really bad, really guilty for turning Slade around into the fence. He felt bad for the guys that have to spend the night repairing the car. But as they ended up showing by the next day, it was actually Slade had a little bit of fault behind it as well for having the little lift. So whether even like they may have still known that and thought, well, no, Kelly shouldn't have, because he did turn sort of left to try and go back down the inside. Whether they thought, well, he's had a little lift, but Kelly still hit him. I don't know if that's the case, but I would have thought that should have put it into the racing incident. If Slade's had a little lift on the throttle on the exit, and moved across on the racing line, but then being spun because of he's had that lift, well, to me that's just bad luck. If you had stayed on the throttle, he probably would have avoided the contact.
If only Kelly had that same level of accepting the blame as he did when he caused the incident in 2006 at Phillip Island with Craig Lowndes.
Yeah, well, I'm dirty as a Ford fan, and you're dirty as a Lowndes fan. So for that, Rick Kelly's never forgiven.
Yeah, no, never. That's a whole nother podcast, though. That's just a whole nother story.
I think that's a whole podcast series on the hatred developed of Rick Kelly on that day.
Yeah, it's 2006 just in general.
Yeah,
it was just a mad year.
Yeah.
So McLaughlin took out that first race, basically from start to finish. Chaz Mostert had a pretty good performance, making up quite a few positions and stealing Reynolds' second place towards the end.
It was surprising with Mostert because he pitted early and took the track position, but he was able to hold it. I would have thought that by the end, someone like Reynolds who'd had good pace all weekend would have been able to catch up, but Mostert just had a really quick car back on Saturday.
The Red Bulls and the Mobile One Mega Racing, so Courtney and Pi both played pretty good strategies. I know that the Red Bulls pitted around mid-race, so they literally split it in two with their tyre strategies. I think Whincup pitted a little bit earlier than Van Gisbergen, and Van Gisbergen pitted lap 28, so it was a little bit more than halfway. But that meant that Van Gisbergen had better tyres towards the end there. So Fabian Coulthard, he had pretty poor qualifying. He just couldn't get it there. I think he also had an issue in the qualifying too, and they only just resolved it for the final qualifying session, so that's why. And he just wasn't able to make up that many positions at in the actual race.
No, that's right. His race didn't even have a lot of pace to it either. So he didn't qualify that well. Race was a bit quiet, and we have seen that from Coulthard from time to time still, and I think that's when you start to see that. That's when the question gets raised: is he going to have that drive next year? Where we, if you want to be a championship contender, you have to be at the front at almost every race. You can have a bad race, but it's almost got to be not your fault. I'm not saying this was all Coulthard's fault, but it was a fairly quiet race for him. You didn't see a lot of him throughout the race, and so we finished in the lower half of the top 10, which is not where you want to be if you're hopefully trying to nab a championship from your teammates.
Another disappointing result was Anton De Pasquale. Qualified in 4, so really good qualifying performance from him, but unfortunately had that cross-threaded wheel nut in his pit stop. And obviously for these shorter races, there's no fuel covering it, so he dropped down to 11th in the end, which was really unfortunate because he had quite good pace, and he could have possibly been on for a podium because he was matching Reynolds a lot of the race before that incident in the pit lane.
Yeah, that's right. Like he was fast in qualifying, he was fast in the race. Showing signs of the promise that he has, but don't always get to see it, and when the day we do get to see it, the pit stop goes wrong for him. So it wasn't ideal. Whether it was the gun or whether it was human error from the guy holding the gun, I don't know. It'll all come out in the wash eventually, but it's an unfortunate result for him. It was, he was on for a good result. I think he probably would have been there for the podium, at least top 5 at the worst. But that's racing, I guess.
There was also the incident with David Reynolds. Will Davison and David Reynolds in the pit lane where Will Davison was released into David Reynolds. It was so close as well, and it was just so difficult to watch because those two pit booms are right next to each other, so they've dropped almost at the same time, but Reynolds has ended up getting out just in front of Davison, and then Davison's just hit him. Even the call went go, and then the car controller said wait, but he'd already run into him, so unfortunately he got that 15-second penalty. Yeah,
that's right. I felt really bad for him. If up until that pit stop, he was probably going to be on for a couple of points in our 3-2-1, because it's he was going to be the first out of the non Waters and Mostert side of things, that the Tickford cars, that was going to grab himself a podium. He's been threatening for a little while. He's had some good results. Some have eluded him as well. This one was going to be a good result. Like he may have been able to hold on to third. Obviously, Reynolds they'd got the better of him in the pit stop. The team probably needed to be awake to that a little bit more. And once they realised that they'd dropped Reynolds and he'd started to move, I think, knowing that Davidson's still up on the jacks, they had to say, wait, I'll hold him there just for that extra half second to a second, and then let him go. It's only minor contact, but that's all it needs. So he lost out on at least a chance of a podium. Look, he still may not have quite got it. Like after the pit stop, he obviously was pretty deflated. He was, he showed no real pace at all, and ended up dropping outside of the top 10 in the end. He obviously the penalty was going to account for most of that anyway, but he was starting to drop down the order. He wasn't holding up anyone. He knew knew of the penalty and was, just had to cop it on the chin.
Yeah. Pretty unfortunate considering he's had some inconsistent races, and this was the first race where he was starting to show really good pace again.
Yeah, well, that's it. We've seen him in the top 10 a lot, but the last couple of rounds he's been a little bit more off the pace, and surprisingly that's when we've seen Holdsworth actually, step up and get a couple of top 10s for himself again. So we know the pace is there in those cars. I think it's just that there must be just a real fine line between having a nice quick race car and one that's not so quick, and getting the most out of it in qualifying, because you've only got to qualify 15th, and you're making your day a lot harder.
Yeah.
At best you're probably only going to finish somewhere in the top 10, unless you're in an absolute rocket ship of a car. You're not going to pass a lot of cars throughout the race, especially a shorter race as well. So, I'm sure he'll bounce back. If he's proved he's got the pace to get a podium at one race, well, that's obviously there to get it at others. So let's hope for his sake we see it soon.
So on to Sunday, and Scott McLaughlin pulled out of an impressive time of 105.47, and he was 0.28 seconds in front of Reynolds, who qualified second. It's quite a fair way back to the rest of the field. It goes back to half a second then for third. So McLaughlin's qualifying pace, like he had said on the Saturday, he had a lot more to give in that car. I think also the track had rubbered up, and the times actually improved because everyone had improved their times across the board. So I was also really impressed by Rick Kelly, who managed to get fourth, even though I think the Altimers do have quite a bit of a disadvantage, considering that actual car is now quite a few years old now, and they haven't really been given a chance to update it. So he's managed to qualify fourth on a circuit that probably really doesn't suit the Nissan that much, considering how long that straight is.
Yeah, well, that's that's a good point. It's, I think, any track that we see the Nissans get up in the top 5 for qualifying, I think it's a fair effort. And if they, but we seen that they don't often get to finish up there either. So, I think Heingartner's easily been the fastest Nissan driver throughout this year, and been about the only one who's consistently found the top 10. Hasn't been there every race, but certainly most out of the Nissan runners. But McLaughlin, we seen through that top 10 shootout that Coulthard was out early, and he must have just had that little bit of cloud cover, and he was able to put in a really good time. And then we seen McLaughlin beat it by 0.015 seconds. The coat of paint on the bumper is the difference between them in qualifying. So it was nothing. And obviously that just goes to show just how quick McLaughlin is at the moment, because McLaughlin had, obviously the sun was out. Reynolds was still very quick as well, as he had been all weekend, but not as quick as you would perhaps expected him to go, just because I think once you get that bit of extra sunlight, the UV picks up, the tyres get that tiny bit more greasy. Whether, maybe that's something they need to look at another time, is how the tyres behave, from shadow to sunlight, all that sort of stuff. Obviously, throughout the course of a race, it doesn't make a difference. It can be, clouds can roll in and roll out all throughout the afternoon anyway. But for a top 10 shootout to, for someone who hasn't been on the pace throughout the weekend, gets lucky and gets a bit of shadow, and then the guy who's been blitzing it all weekend suddenly gets bright sunshine and ends up qualifying 5th or 6th through something that's not even his fault. I don't know. Maybe they need a special top 10 shootout tyre, like an ultra soft type tyre that doesn't react as much to the sunlight. I don't know, but that's a different subject for another day. It was quite an entertaining top 10 shootout as well. I felt a little bit sorry for Frosty after his issues back on the Saturday during the race. He had brake issues, I think it was. They bit hard to tell. I don't know if the tyre went down before he hit the brakes or what. It was a bit weird, and I don't think they ever gave a full explanation to it. Ended up qualifying 10th.
Yeah, there was also the just touching on your tire subject. They were talking about how the tires, because it's so hot in Darwin, the tires you can warm them up one lap and then you have one good lap with them. You can't go do another second lap with them because they're no good. Then they're already like 0.05 off the pace that you could possibly do, and every single lap you go around they're getting 0.05 of a second slower. So it's pretty significant degradation around there just because it's so bloody hot in Darwin.
Yeah.
So it makes you makes it a bit interesting if they decide to move to like a more summer kind of month for like the Darwin or Townsville kind of races, because that degradation will only just increase then, because it will only get hotter and you're just gonna have tires blasting off the wheels.
That's it. Yeah, I would think if they move to a summer series, that surely they'd have some common sense and try and keep the likes of Townsville, to a degree, Ipswich and the Gold Coast as well, Darwin, especially, keep them at the start or the end of the season to keep it away from the hottest time of the year. Because the drivers love going up there now because they get out of Victoria or Sydney or where it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
And they get to go up to Darwin where it was 30 degrees back on the weekend up there. So like they're all in air conditioning. Like I was sitting here in Brisbane with a jumper on for most of the afternoon. So I think it got down to a chilly 22 degrees or something like that. But that's cold enough for us here in Brisbane. That's reaching for the jumper time. So
yeah.
But it would have been great to be up there, like 30 degrees. It didn't look like there was a lot of breeze for the afternoon, but I'm sure there was still something. So it would have been a nice day.
So onto the race, the longer race of the weekend, 70 laps at 200 kilometres. Scott McLaughlin took it out again, clean sweep of the whole weekend. First ever person to get the Triple Crown as well. Fabian Coulthard improved a little bit. He managed to snag a third, and David Reynolds in second. So I was pretty impressed by how well David Reynolds performed over the weekend to get a double podium. Obviously, we'll touch on that a little bit later when we go through our top drivers from the weekend. But yeah, it wasn't as crazy a start to the race, which I think was good because it didn't take out so many drivers at the beginning. But yeah, it was a pretty good race in the end.
Yeah, well, Reynolds, he was probably the second biggest standout for the weekend behind only McLaughlin. Yeah, it was good to see Coulthard bounce back. He needed to. He let a few points slip in the first race for the weekend, so he needed to bounce back. He had a shot at second, but I think third was probably about where the pace was for his car for the weekend. Waters, I thought he was really good all weekend. He had a pair of fourth places, so that's good consistency from him. I think we had all of the Tickford cars again back up in the top 10. So Will Davidson was able to bounce back as well, which is nice to see for him as well. He didn't get the whole weekend didn't suck for him. He managed to get some sort of result. Not the same as a podium would have been, but a top 10 still a top 10. I think Whincup's almost the standout for the Sunday race because he got bumped off early in the race and he ended up back down 22nd, 23rd after the first couple of laps and battled back to finish fifth.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to have the pace for a podium, but I think the first couple of laps after he went off, everything just opened up for him. There were cars taking each other off ahead of him, bumping each other wide. He's just zipping through on the inside. Thank you very much. Takes another position or two, and it's like, hang on, he's captain cut fight back from 22nd. Yeah. He's not even working for it. He's just driving. It's like racing online or something like that, and you manage to win the race because everybody else is taking each other off. So it was almost like watching that. But he drove phenomenal all weekend, really, considering their pace of qualifying, and I think there's Triple Eight slowly working out their car. Obviously, it still goes back to at the risk of sounding like a broken record, it's still that twin or lack of twin spring that's hurting them. I think Penright's definitely they've gotten on top of their car and they're showing really good pace. Triple Eight's getting there. I think they're definitely well and truly faster than Brad Jones Racing now. They started off well, but they were able to capitalise on the other guys being well off the pace, and now, where they've probably stayed about the same sort of pace, the other guys have leapt ahead. But Penrite at a much faster rate than Triple Eight. That's about the only thing I think they need to work on now is getting that one lap pace. We've seen both of them missed out on the top 10 shootout for Sunday, which I don't even think it's in the record books.
2015 was the last time that happened, where both of them missed out on the top 10
there
shootout.
You go. So a little bit more recent than I thought. I honestly thought that it hadn't been done. I've seen races where one of them's missed out, but for both, that almost never happens. So it was a good job from Whincup to battle back up to fifth, especially after going off early.
Just touching on Triple Eight. Obviously, we aren't a biased podcast, so we have to talk about Triple Eight as well. They put a post up on social media, across Instagram and Facebook and stuff, after that top 10 shootout where they didn't actually get into it, and it was something to the thought of that isn't good enough. We know that our fans expect more from us. We'll fight hard during the race, and we'll regain those lost positions. And I'm like, wow, that's certainly something. So they've certainly feel bad about not providing the amount of wins and stuff that they provided last year, this year as well. So they probably feel like they're disappointing the fans quite a bit. I don't know. Obviously, I haven't been to a live race this so far this season. Mine's the next one coming up in Townsville. But last year, it was very much an even amount of Shell V-Power and Red Bull shirts, pretty even. I'm wondering whether we're going to see more Shell V-Power, especially in Townsville, because Townsville's still only 10 years old, but I think the people in Townsville are very, very much bandwagoners, so it'll be interesting to see if many people transfer over to Shell V-Power.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think, and like we touched on a while ago on a few podcasts earlier, I think for most Ford fans, we just go for the brand. So as much as I still want to see Tickford winning races as well, but right now it's all about Scotty McLaughlin and wanting him to win every race, because that means a Ford's winning every race. So I think you would probably find a few more Ford fans ditching their Tickford gear, especially they'll be tossing out the old Mark Winterbottom Bottle-O shirts, and they'll be picking up a brand new Scott McLaughlin 17 DJR shirt. So then that's I think I'm not afraid to admit that I'm happy to jump around between the bandwagons when it comes to the Ford teams. I just want to see Fords up top, and I'm sure Holden fans are the same. I think a lot of the HRT guys from back in the day have probably left what is now Walkinshaw, and have probably migrated over to Red Bull because they're the leading Holden team. So it happens. You just ultimately you're tribal. You want Holden to win. You want Ford to win. So that's where it's going to go. So but going back to Triple Eight, I think they'll still be feeling pretty ordinary. They've had one race win, and that was way back in Tasmania. So it's been quite a few races now since a win. I can't remember a longer losing streak, really. So you'd have to be going back to their early days to see a gap between race wins
back
that.
Before it was Better Electrical, back when it was Aussie Mail with John Bow in the Triple Eight, I think it was. That's 2004 or 2003, which was years and years ago now. Brad Jones, he's generally had his own team. He was running with them, but I think he did have the number Triple Eight for a little while. I don't think it had anything to do with the team, but it was they always started off as Better Electrical in those cars. But you'd be going back to 2005 when Lounsey started there would be when you started seeing gaps that long between race wins.
So it's but even that, like when they're just genuinely off the pace,
Yeah.
like their qualifying's poor. Like Van Gisbergen managed to find a few spots throughout the race, but he's just not having a good time at all at the moment. And Whincup, I think it's just his experience. He's been around for a long time now, so I think he just knows how to wrestle the most out of a car, as you would expect from a 7-time champion. So
Yeah.
that's why we're seeing him still get those decent results at the moment. They'd still be wanting podiums. I still think overall they've improved. Like from where they were, they started off well in Adelaide, but Penrite was not up there. I think they were just there because they just happened to roll out for the first race weekend with the faster cars. Since then, as the other cars are starting to improve, they went backwards. They're now starting to come back up, but it's just slowly. So maybe I think at the moment, like they would probably already look now and think, well, the championship's beyond us. So it would need a miracle to win it from here.
Yeah,
I think their one now is they're just aiming for a Bathurst winning car. So I think that's what they're shooting for. They'll give up on the championship. If it comes to them, great. But it looks very unlikely. But I think they'll be just aiming for hopefully get 1 or 2 cars on the podium at Bathurst, and for them they'll be looking for the top step.
Yeah, I think it's like we said a few podcasts ago. It's very much a transitional period, changing of the guard kind of thing. We're going to see more Shell V-Power at the front, and then Penrite Racing, and then it's really just kind of a mixed bag kind of thing. But yeah, that's a whole nother range of topic as well, which we can go through once we do.
I don't think it should be underestimated too how much impact Lowndes' retirement's had on the team, because his experience, like he's been around for 100 years in the sport, so no doubt he's still helping them behind the scenes, but he's not in the car to help with setup. Like he's not out there for those couple of practice sessions prior to qualifying. They're constantly sharing data. Like obviously they got Frosty's data to look at too, but it's his first year driving, an all-new manufacturer, and he's he was another one that's earlier in the year while other teams were struggling. His results were good. I thought that they'll be able to maintain that wave, but they've since dropped off the back of that, and they've started finding themselves in the mid-pack more often than not now. So. I think it's underestimated how much of an impact Lowndes' retirement's had on the team.
Obviously, that all that can be discussed when we do our mid-season review, which will be the next podcast that we're going to be doing before the Townsville round. But before we go into all of that, what will be who's your top 3 from this weekend?
Well, you'd be silly to look past McLaughlin for 3 points. First winner of the Triple Crown. The race has been around since '98 and no one's won it. So, back then for a long time, I think until the early 2000s, it was still just to get all 3 race wins.
Yeah.
Once it dropped back to just being 2 races, they threw in the top 10 shootout as the what you needed to complete the Triple Crown. Whether that makes it easier or harder or not, I don't know. I guess to get the second element of that, you have to get it all done in 1 lap. But and he only just done that, so he was very lucky. He basically won the Triple Crown by 0.015 of a second. So because once he was on pole, I don't think anyone was going to catch him. So, but it was good to see. That trophy that ended up being a little bit underwhelming when they finally brought that out. As he touched on, he doesn't know how many nuggets it'll hold compared to the championship trophy, but good on him. It's about time it went off, and I don't think there'll be too many people complaining about McLaughlin winning it. Reynolds, he gets 2 points quite easily. Third on Saturday, second on Sunday, 2 podiums. It'd be. Going into the weekend, I thought that Erebus were perhaps on par with Tickford in terms of their pace. I would actually think that Erebus has now perhaps jumped ahead of Tickford for their overall race pace, because we're still seeing a little bit of inconsistency from Di Pasquale, but Reynolds, he's starting to find the podium more often than not now. I think he's even had more podiums than any other driver in the past couple of rounds. So, obviously aside from McLaughlin. who he has a mortgage on the top step at the moment. But other than McLaughlin, Reynolds has the most podiums over the past couple of rounds, so that's why you're starting to see him. He's now up to third in the championship. It's still a bit of a gap between him and Coulthard ahead, but we've seen Coulthard he's still got a little bit of a roller coaster about him too, so still nothing to say that Reynolds can't finish second in the championship. Whincup gets my 1 point because he's qualified mainly just for Sunday. He qualified not great, got tapped off, and had to fight his way back from 20-something in the field, but managed to finish fifth and passed his teammate along the way, who only managed to finish 10th and didn't have the same dramas. So I think that was a really good drive from Whincup.
So ours are actually the same, basically for the same reasons as well. So it just goes to show that we do agree on most things.
Yeah.
But just an interesting fact. So obviously this round is called the Bet Easy Darwin Triple Crown, right? So it used to be just called the Darwin Triple Crown because there's a casino in Darwin called the Triple Crown Casino. So the Triple Crown doesn't actually sponsor this anymore, but they still managed to get their name out there because it's just what the event is called now. So they don't even have to pay for this advertising anymore.
Did not even know that. So it's like accidental sponsorship. It's
exactly.
Genius.
So that's why it was called Triple Crown back in the 90s and early 2000s, because they sponsored it and they thought, Triple Crown, there's 3 races, how cool. And that's why they sponsored it. And then that's why it's ended. And then now they just get free sponsorship for 21 years or whatever it's been running. So
yeah, that's it. And I don't think they'll change it anytime soon.
No, they won't.
They might now that it's been won. We can finally retire the Triple Crown. We'll come up with something else.
Yeah, it was interesting because I've even got the lanyards from back in the day in 05 and 06 and 07 when I went there, and they still have the little Triple Crown logo on it, because back then it was still sponsored by them. But yeah, just an interesting fact for you guys, because I think there's only 1 or 2 casinos actually in Darwin, and that's one of them. They might have changed the name by now because I haven't been back there for a few years, but that's why it used to be called the Triple Crown. But anyway,
well, you learn something new every day.
Exactly.
That's my fun fact for the day.
So next round is in Townsville. So that's my home event, and I'm going to be up in race control. I can't disclose that much about it because post-race I can talk about it, but pre-race I can basically just tell you about my position and what it involves, but I'm really not actually supposed to have... I'm not supposed to really talk about all the inner workings. But I'll tell you what my position entitles anyway. So I'm up in race control, which is really awesome, obviously. I started off 4 or 5 years... it'll be 5 years now. I started off in the Young Officials program, which is a really awesome program that CAMS run. So if any people interested in becoming an official, Young Officials is where it's at, where basically you get to go around for the 3 days and you get to experience all the different sections. So you are like a flag marshal on the Friday, scrutineer on the Saturday. I can't remember what we did on the Sunday. Oh no, maybe, yeah, and then it was flag point in the for the race in the Arvo, and then looking at all the different places around the joint that we didn't get to see on the Sunday morning. So that's really cool. And we got to go up to race control. Obviously, you have to be dead silent. And I went up there, and it's nice and air-conned. And obviously, it's hot in Townsville. It's nice and air-conned, and you can see the whole race from there. And I'm like, that's where I want to be. So
you probably couldn't get a better seat. There's 1,000 TV screens.
It's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you can literally... if they don't really give you a very good picture, especially in the Townsville one, of what race control looks like. The camera is on the roof, and it faces backwards towards the back of the room. So you can really only see, Tim Schenken and all the race assistants next to him.
It basically looks like they've just hijacked the security camera.
It does.
Whenever they show footage of Tim in there doing his thing, and usually he's starting to point fingers and he's calling for different cameras to be
Yeah.
showing replays, and he's when something big's happened, it's always the same shot. They've just got like the one little camera pointing back at them. A couple of TVs behind, a few guys, pretending like they know what they're doing. They'll be holding a pen, trying to like pretend they're writing something down. That's all it looks like. Is just like they've just jumped on and hacked into the security system and found the camera that's pointing back at Tim Schenken. So
it's all just pretend.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that no one's actually in control of the race. They're just up there. He's actually just ordering beers for everybody.
Tim just yells at us and tells us what to do. I'm like, okay, Tim, and that's what we do. Also, little known fact about Tim, he really, really loves Tim Tam. So if you ever want to get on the good side of Tim Schenken, just give him some Tim. That's it.
Tim.
I thought it was ironic. And then they're like, no, go get some Tim Tams tonight from the shop, bring them in. Tim will love you. Sure enough, come in. And I'm like, hey, Tim, do you want some Tim Tams for the race? And he's like, yeah, sure, thanks. And then he's like, Keegan's pretty cool, so.
Yeah. And then he goes back to his hotel room and throws a packet of Tim Tams on the mound of Tim Tam packets that everybody else has brought him in. He actually hates them. Maybe the other one, his real name is actually Steve, and he just changed his name to Tim for his love of Tim Tams.
That's it.
His name was Steve all along, and we just didn't know.
It's interesting though, but like, so Tim Schenken's role is race director. So he's the category director for supercars. And underneath him is Michael Masi, who is now actually gone off. He's the step-in race director for Formula One at the moment, obviously with the passing of Charlie Whiting. I'm not sure who his secondary is now, but Michael Masi also used to do the Super 2. So there's a few gaps now in the supercars area. But it's interesting because everyone, whenever there's a decision made about like a controversial penalty or whatever, everyone gets really upset at Tim, but that's the wrong guy. It's the wrong guy. It's actually, who is it at the moment?
You got Craig Baird.
Yeah, Craig Baird's
the one mostly handing out the penalties.
Exactly. It's Craig Baird who's the driver standards. And he actually
that's a long stretch for him to be in charge of driver standards. I think that's why he's quick to hand out penalties so he doesn't go down in history as the most penalised driver.
Maybe.
He was known for a couple back in his day.
Yeah, he drove for WPS for a little while there as well. And
he had quite a few teams in the end. He wasn't able to. I think WPS is where he had his probably longest stay in supercars, but I think he was just happy to get a seat anywhere for most of the time.
I can't say too much about him, obviously, because I have to work with him
in
a few weeks' time. But everyone up there is obviously very agreeable. You have to get along really well, basically, because you have to be very, very quick on your feet, and you have to, because obviously you're making those decisions as quick as you can. That's obviously how come we end up with that's how come they also do post-race investigations as well, because obviously there can be lots and lots going on up there, and that's also why you have to stay really quiet. But my particular role last year, someone was ill and couldn't make it to the event. I was initially going to be the runner, which I had been the previous year, but I was training to do communications the year before, so 2017, and then in 2018, so last year, they're like, okay, do you want to be the assistant communicator? And I'm like, hell yeah. So I was this assistant communicator for the flag points, which was really awesome to do. You have to speak very clearly, and it's also very difficult to talk to the flag points because they've obviously got cars flying past them, and then they're trying to talk back to you in this little radio, so it gets a little bit difficult. The most difficult circuit to go to though is Bathurst, because you can't hear anyone else besides from like the 2 flag points near you, and it's really, really difficult. But Townsville's pretty good because there's very minimal interruptions. Obviously there's not too many buildings in the parklands, because it's basically just a park, the Civic Theatre,
Yeah,
and
it's
then
quite a short circuit still.
yeah, yeah, and like literally most of the corners are within like a 2 kilometer radius of race control, so it's pretty easy to hear most people. Besides from turn, I think it's 11, oh no, turn 10, where they're going flat out straight past the flag post. That's really difficult to hear.
It starts sounding like a Hungry Jack's speaker at the drive-through.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. But yeah, it's always really good fun, and obviously it's just on a volunteer basis. I haven't really had to do that much training for it. Really, it's just like kind of on the job kind of training, and really just use your common sense, and just you do have to learn the proper way to communicate. So you don't say copy or anything like that. You say like yes, yes, no, no, and stuff like that. So some people don't get that memo, and it's a little bit annoying. And then it's different from circuit to circuit as well. Like you're allowed to say copy at Bathurst, but not in Townsville. So it's a little bit confused there. But it's all really good fun. And if you ever want to get closer to the action, I think volunteering is a great way to do it. Obviously, you have to be pretty good in your role as well. Like you can't just mess around and like just be watching the cars the whole time. You have to also concentrate on the racing.
Yeah. I don't think I'll be too good at it. I'll be too biased. There'll be too many Holdens getting drive-through penalties. There'll be Greg Murphy spec 5-minute penalties every race.
I think the stewards that do the supercars ones, I think most of them do most of the rounds. They've been doing it for years as well. I think I am the youngest easily in race control by I'd say about 20 or 30 years. So it's a fairly big age gap. I think the average age for volunteers is 55 or something. So they're needing some new ones.
They need some young blood.
That's it. Michael Massey is pretty young as well, so
yep.
he's risen through the ranks really quickly, and he's really good at what he does. Obviously, as he's been called up to do F1. But yeah.
Well, it's still it's cool, and I guess it's like you said, it's just a case of jumping online and finding out where you can volunteer and give it a crack, and start from one spot. I think you touched on too, like a lot of the guys in race control go around from race to race. Now it's not just localized per circuit. I think that was one of their smartest moves. Was like obviously those guys they're earning a wage for what they do. So I think, I don't know how much it would be worth to Tim Schenken to be in his position, but...
No, those are all volunteer bases as well.
Oh, really? Everyone there's
Tim
a volunteer?
Schenken's a volunteer.
Oh, wow,
So
good for him.
It's all just volunteer.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, I assume a lot of them would be retired, but especially like Tim Schenken, he would have made lots of money back in the day when he was racing, so he can clearly afford to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that's it. Oh, I'm sure, Supercars probably pay his way for the weekend at the very least, or something like that. He goes around, but that was, we start to see that consistency when it comes to adjudicating. Like you're never going to agree. You're never going to have both sides fully agree that he definitely deserved that penalty, or he definitely deserved to get away with that penalty. You're always going to have one set of fans upset.
Yeah.
So that's just racing. It happens in football when your team gets penalised, and you got your arms up in the air in front of the TV, complaining to no one else that's around you, and you're just screaming at the TV. So, but that was the best thing that they did, was they got they got that core group to go around to every race, and so that you would expect more consistency in the decisions. It doesn't always happen. You do see some that are a bit like you're still left wondering the penalties for some. I guess the Rick Kelly one was a little bit like that, but at the time it was pretty easy. You just would have thought, it's Rick Kelly's fault straight up. That's a penalty. But as we touched on already, he wasn't necessarily all his fault and still got the penalty anyway. But like I said, you can't keep everybody happy. But that's pretty cool though. Okay, that's definitely. You'd certainly get myself and there's a lot of other people jealous of getting to go behind the scenes and and see something that the rest of us don't ever get to see. So that's the rest of us that are just regular fans, we just we're on the other side of the fence. So yeah, we just well, at least we're closer to the hot dogs.
That's true. That's true. Those, I think last year in Townsville they did do a behind the scenes of race control kind of thing, but I think they only showed it trackside. They didn't actually do it in the telecast, which was unfortunate because it was actually a really good behind the scenes. But it was funny because they purposely did it like really early in the morning before there was like anything actually happening, so they could have cameras in there and walk around. But we all had to sit there and pretend that we were doing things because it looks really funny. We're all just sitting there like with our radio on and everything, even though literally nothing's happening. So that was interesting as well. But
that's it.
If they do switch to the camera and race control, I think they've moved it back a little bit further, so you could probably just see me. You'll know which one is me as well because I'll be the youngest one there. So
that's it.
So
just look for anyone without the walking chair thing, and you'll be fine.
That's it. Well, that just about wraps us up for today. Have you got any closing comments for us, Shane?
No, I guess we'll touch on our mid-season report card in a week or two, and we've got to work out who's been good, who's been bad, who needs attention. And then we'll look forward to Townsville after that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining me.
No worries, Matt. We'll talk to you next time.
Righto. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.